Welcome to Healing Mindset, where we unpack the truth behind balance, purpose, and mental well being. I am Nazish, and today we are joined by amazing Dr. David Shar, a globally recognized expert in workplace psychology who helps professionals reignite their passion and prevent burnout. With a blend of humor, evidence based insight, and real life wisdom, David reminds us that fulfillment at work isn't about doing more, it is about remembering why we started. So let's talk about purpose, passion, and what it really means to heal our relationship with work. Welcome to the show, David.
Thank you so much, Nazish. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Uh, David, your work explores why people fall out of love with their jobs, something that's becoming too common today, nowadays. So, what do you think causes that emotional drift between people and their purpose?
Yeah, I think there's a lot there. And my research finds that there's a lot going on there, right? One of the biggest takeaways from my research is that there isn't just one answer to this. And therefore there's not like a silver bullet to kind of fix all of it. Um, but if there was a silver bullet, it would be to recognize how individualized leadership needs to be to really understand people. Part of me expected to find that that across all respondents they said, "Oh, it's too much work." We hear about this with burnout all the time, right? That we burn out because it's work overload, too much work.
Yeah.
Um, but but while some people reported, that there was the catalyst toward their passion decline was related to, you know, so much work and it just became overwhelming. Others said that it wasn't enough work, that they started to feel stagnant, like they weren't challenged. They felt like they had learned everything they could and they stopped loving work because of that. So so these things were really complicated. When people, I've always been sort of cynical about people saying, about burnout. Oh yeah, like too much work. Then you burn out. I challenge people to think about a time when they were and bartenders would understand this specifically well, I think. But if any of us who have been in a busy bar, like on a Friday night or something, right? Um, if you imagine that bartender and the bar is packed and people are yelling out orders and throwing tips your way and you're blending drinks and shaking up drinks and if you look at the bartender in that moment, do they look burned out? Usually not. Usually it looks like it's the exact opposite. It looks like they're in a state of flow where sort of their body just takes over and everything is just working automatically and it's mastery and process, right? Um, that's how you would normally see that bartender. But it now take the exact same bartender, and every time they turn around, they're at to reach for a glass. The glass is either not there or is dirty. Now you have a bartender who's going to start looking frustrated and cynical and start looking more like somebody who's burning out, right? So even when we point to things like overwork, like work overload and things like that, oftentimes it's not the work that we signed up to do. It's the bureaucracy, the interpersonal conflict, the 30 meetings a week, all of those things that's get in the way of the work that we want to do, that our employer wants us to do, that our manager wants us to do, the essential work, the work that makes a difference. It's all this other stuff. It's this noise that gets in the way. And I think that that's a big contributor to burnout. But I think ultimately it's about knowing your people and being in tune with them and knowing whether they need more or they need less or if there's something else happening.
That is such an eye opener, David. I mean, realizing that burnout isn't always associated with exhaustion, but it is more about if you're growing, about your emotional alignment with things and everything. It's amazing.
Huh.
Yeah. So, you often talk about rekindling passion. Like for someone who feels their spark has faded, how can they begin to reignite that sense of purpose?
Yeah, I think it's important to do it early. And I think it's important to communicate. I oftentimes so one of the things that kind of depressed me about my research was that um you know it seemed way too common that my respondents had passed this point of no return, right? And so they couldn't fix it. Um but the promising thing here is that it doesn't happen in a blink of an eye. Maybe you realize it very like one day you wake up and you realize it, but it's always been there. I remember interviewing this one individual who talked about how they they went on vacation and for the first time ever, they turned off their cell phone, their work cell phone, and didn't check their work emails. And when they got back from that vacation, they realized they didn't love their work anymore, that they were done. It's like, so it was presented to me in a way like it just happened. It just happened. But when I pushed a little bit, because the type of research I did was phenomenological research. So for those that don't know, that it's all about the researcher taking sort of an active role in interpreting what's actually happening, not just necessarily taking, the respondent at their word, but pushing a little and trying to understand a little bit better. And so I pushed this individual and I said, that's really interesting that it happened overnight like that. I said, why did you turn your cell phone off this time after working for this organization for whatever it was, almost a decade? Why did you turn it off this time? And that's when things started backing up. And well, there were a couple things recently that had happened, in their personal life and that started to create this disconnect with them and their work. And it's like, oh, so this didn't happen overnight. So even when we think it happens overnight, it doesn't happen overnight. So I think that that's the good news, that it does happen over time. And very often as it's happening, we are calling out for help. We are saying, help me. I'm burning out. I need something. Give me more work or put me somewhere else or give me something that's going to reignite this passion. And sometimes it falls on deaf ears and other times, leadership will jump in and just come up with a solution, and it's very performative. And it's like one person said, "I need more. I need to contribute more." And so leadership's like, "Sure, here's a bunch of committees you can be on," and created these committees that did nothing. It was just like busy work. And it was like, what a disconnect. So a lot of times leadership tries to it's my job as the leader to come up with a solution. It needs to be collaborative. We need to be working together. But certainly when you start feeling like work is becoming too much, what can you do as the individual contributor? You feel like what's happening, like just work isn't doing it for me anymore. I like to say to my clients often that when you are incredibly passionate about work, and, one of the early researchers on burnout, Ayala Pines, used to say that in order to be burnout, you need to be on fire first, right? People who aren't passionate about their work aren't going to burn out, right? Um, so if you're one of those people, you're on fire, you're really passionate about your work. Unfortunately, if you put too much in and don't set up boundaries early, I like to say that I don't like to say, but it's the truth, and I share it with people that eventually one of two things is going to happen. Either you're going to burn out, or the world around you is going to burn down. Right? So, like, if you keep pushing, either you are then going to start feeling cynical and feeling emotionally exhausted and pull back. But if you continue and you don't pull back, what's going to happen is that everything around you, all of those systems that you have and those support groups and that life outside of work is they're not going to be there for you because you're just putting everything into work. When we were in like junior high, right? Or elementary school, late in elementary school, and we have this friend, and maybe you were the person. If you didn't have this friend, you were probably this person. But We have this friend who they get their first boyfriend or their first girlfriend, right? And they just become obsessed with this relationship. And so suddenly you and the rest of the friends no longer exist. They're standing you up all the time to hang out with their friend. They're they're skipping class to go out with their friend. They're with their significant other. That becomes their whole life. And you see it, and even as a teenager, you know this is not going to end well, right? We know it's not going to end well because then what ends up happening is they end up in this messy, dramatic breakup, and the friend group has already moved on, right? So if we can see that as teenagers, why aren't employers seeing this? Why aren't leaders seeing this? Why do we allow our employees to come in and give and give and give and give without saying, whoa, 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 let's slow down. I think there's this short-term gain that like, why would I ever say no to somebody who's trying to do more, but what ends up happening is eventually they give and give and give and give until it's just a dramatic like end to it. And alternatively, if you can set up boundaries and for yourself and your employer can, if you're an employer leader, you could set up boundaries for your people, then you could protect them. You could protect yourself, you could protect each other early on. And so then you have that that uh that sort of like top employee remain the top employee for a very long time, as opposed to them doing a little bit more, but you're on borrowed time before they end up burning out.
That is such a refreshing perspective, David. And more than refreshing, it is like a real perspective of what happens with us in real life and what we as an as somebody who works feel through our employers and a lot of things. So just tell me this thing, do you think that rediscovering this passion is about changing the job or changing the way we relate the work we already do?
Yes, yeah, that's a great question. I think it's definitely comes down to redefining things, right? I think we really struggle if we try to get back into it, right? And reconnect with the work the way that we originally did. One of the really fascinating things that came out from my research was a number of my participants um described how they like first of all of them when they were describing what it was like to be passionate about work, they talked about very specific aspects of the work. They talked about growth and development and they talked about things like mission and values, and they talked about things like having impact and things like that, right? When they talked about work decline or passion decline at work, they talked about different things. They talked about interpersonal conflict. They talked about poor leadership. And some of them described how they didn't even really see that stuff at first. It was like as soon as they had started to lose their passion, they looked up from their work. They lost track of their mission. They lost track of that client, and they started to see all this mess around them. And what was so interesting was that once they did that, they couldn't unsee it. They would try to separate themselves from the drama. They would try to refocus on their client. They tried so hard and they just couldn't do it. So I think your suggestion is dead on that you need something to change, right? There needs to be some sort of shift. Um, like in the way that we look at work, you need a new stretch assignment, a new job sometimes, a new job description, and a new a promotion, or even to move into a different department, something like that. That works much better because it's just like that analogy when you have a horrible breakup, you know, like falling back in love with that initial person is not typically going to happen, right?
Mhm.
For some of us, it's near impossible to fall back in love once we've seen all the warts and issues with this relationship, right? We've seen them for who they are and us together for what we are. And so but it doesn't mean that you can't take everything you learned and invest it in a healthier relationship with a different employer, with a different department, with a different job, something of that nature where something else shifts. One of my respondents talked about this cycle that she named it. This was the way she thought about falling out of love with work, about passion decline. She had experienced this multiple times in her career, and she said, "I call it the disillusionment cycle." That
Mhm.
basically I go and go and go and put everything in and learn everything I can and grow as much as I can, and then I start to become disillusioned with work. I start to lose my passion. She said, "That's an internal signal to me that I've learned everything I can. I've grown as much as I can, and now I'm uncomfortable and need to get myself somewhere else. It shows me it's time to move on."
It is so beautiful. Like, change is always good. Somewhere at some places when you are feeling exhausted, when you're feeling that your growth is stunted, at that moment, the change that you're talking about can really help a lot of people. And I'm sure many of our listeners will be able to relate with what you are saying right now, because I personally can. And they and they might find their change somewhere, like simple things that you said, changing your apartment, changing the way you look at things. There are so many things. It's such a beautiful perspective, David.
Right, right. And if the change isn't external, at least internal.
Mhm.
Start thinking about work in a different way. One of my respondents also described how they moved on from thinking about work as like the things that they did. It was no longer just completely about their employer, right? It
Mhm.
wasn't about I work for this organization. It was I do this type of work. I have this type of impact, and I can take that with me anywhere, and that's portable. And so thinking about the ultimate impact that you're having on people, I think is really a sort of mental shift, a psychological shift that's really important to focus yourself on the good that you're doing, the impact that you're having.
That is true. And from what I have observed personally, is that leaders or these employers, they play such a crucial role in shaping workplace energy. From what you have seen, what can organizations do differently to truly protect their people from this burnout?
Yeah, I think they need to set boundaries early on. I think they need to talk and make sure that you understand your people because like I said so many times again and again in my research what I saw was that this had existed. People were fighting because nobody wants to fall out of love. And so they were fighting for it and it good leaders will know that that's happening and they'll be there early to support and to fight with you, to figure out solutions. One of the things that I hear from employers all the time and leaders of all kinds all the time is I have an open door policy. And they're so proud of their open door policy and great. An open door policy is awesome. And by the way, if you have an open door policy and your door is physically closed all the time, not as awesome, but okay, you're almost there, right? But I think that the typical open door policy doesn't actually work unless you use it to get up out of your own desk and walk through that open door to go talk to your people.
Yeah,
Because
that
you can yeah,
it has to be a
e
two-way effort. That is
exactly.
yeah. And
You can tell people, "Come to me," but they're not going to. You may not be as approachable as you think you are. They might not be as confident in approaching you as you think they are. Get up and go talk to people. Like, figure out you should know what's happening with your people and be there before they even bring the problem to you.
that is so practical, yeah, and yet so true. And it is like real change does not always have to be some massive reform you are doing and changing this big thing. It can just start with simple things like empathy, like you said, that open door, that's so empathetic, and that just makes somebody feel wanted. So there's this one more thing, this wanted thing and this open door thing made it clicked to my mind. Do you think that these little small cultural shifts like flexibility or recognitions make big difference in reducing stress?
Yes, I think small things go a long way. I teach industrial organizational psychology graduate students, right? So the long term, but what we do is basically the psychology of work. It's like if your HR director and your psychologist had a baby, that would be us, right? So we go into workplaces and help with change efforts, and help with culture change and things like that. And when I'm working with my students and we bring live clients in to partner with us, if any of your listeners are ever interested in partnering with us, they should definitely contact me. But um, it's really important that we take all the theory that they're learning, we take all of the models and the frameworks and the toolkit that they're developing, and then we put it through a stress test. And that stress test is in my organizational change class where we now are working directly with a real client. And in some ways, they have to unlearn a lot of what they've learned because now it's about utility. It's about the fact that you can come up with the biggest, best, most brilliant and evidence-backed solutions in the world. But if it's too big, if the client doesn't have the bandwidth, if they don't have the buy-in, if they don't have the personnel, if they don't have the budget, if they don't have these things, then it's crap, right? So I think that oftentimes we get stuck in thinking that our change efforts need to be enormous. And what happens is that those things just overwhelm, they shut down the system, and there's a reason why the vast majority of change effort seems to fail. I think that it needs to start tiny. Find one thing that will actually make a difference. Leader communication will make a difference. Maybe it's a policy that nobody is to send out emails after 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. Little change could make a huge difference. I had one client who was the director of a large organization, and he said that the way he moved up the ladder was that he would be sending out emails and doing work into the middle of the night. And even when he wasn't, he would set his email timer to send his emails at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning so that it would look like he was working into the middle of the night. And he said that at the director level, he continued to do this to test the loyalty and the work ethic of his people. And COVID was a huge wake up call for him when everybody went, uh, you know, thought anew about their priorities and stuff like that. And he said he felt horrible doing it and he would never do that again. And now he gets upset with people when they send him emails in the middle of the night, but just something like that. No emails after 6 p.m., 7 p.m. could make a enormous difference.
It can, it definitely can, and I can vouch for that personally. And I think for anybody who is listening right now and who's into leadership, who's hiring people, who's an employer here, so that's just a reminder for all of them to impact things with small conversations, small things, to have these small changes in their way, which can actually save their people from burnout.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Agree.
yeah, and David, you bring such humor into these conversations about burnout, which is something serious, and I think that a lot of people do not associate with this humor. So, and which I find very amazing. Trust me. So, how does this laughter help people process or even prevent emotional exhaustion?
Oh, I think it's so important. I think what's important is being human. And I think that we've developed this work culture over time where um leaders are scared to seem human. They don't want to seem fallible. I say to my clients often that you come in with this coat of armor pretending that you've got everything figured out and that you're infallible. Um the truth is that your employees know that you are not infallible. The only
Yeah.
thing they don't know is whether you know that you're not infallible, right? So I think that humor is a humanizing, it's such a humanizing tool that shows that I'm human, that I'm in this with you. And to be able to laugh at ourselves and laugh at our situation, I think it naturally de stresses things, but it also humanizes things. Stop acting like you are at the top of the totem pole and untouchable and completely infallible. In my own life and career, what I have found is every rung that I've climbed, I have realized that I have to do more and more to level the playing field to build trust again. So, my sense of humor, my ability to laugh at myself has increased over time, not decreased, because it's so important to be relatable and it's so important to be able to be human with your people and to make them feel as comfortable as possible. I think vulnerability from a leader is an incredibly valuable thing.
That is such a refreshing perspective, and like it I really think that really connects with the idea that humor doesn't dismiss the pain, but it makes space for humanity in it. It makes you feel human. It makes you feel real,
That yeah.
which is so amazing. And like for any of us who is listening right now and maybe feel exhausted or on a burn or might be on a or might be like very unmotivated or even questioning their purpose. So, what is the immediate step that they can take today to begin healing with the relationship they have in their workspace?
So first of all, give yourself permission to pause. Tell whoever you need, put an away message on your computer, even if you're not taking the day off work. Just like just like at after work, if you normally are taking calls, put an away message, whatever it is. I have one client who has such a stressful job and he has two different hobbies that keep him grounded. One, he's in a band, super social kind of activity. The other, he has a small boat he takes out on the lake and he goes fishing completely alone with his thoughts for a couple hours. Go fishing, even if you don't know how. Take a boat out on the lake. Just be with yourself and your thoughts. And part of your thoughts should be completely separate from work. Put it on your calendar to have times when you're not allowed to think about work, but also allow yourself to reflect a little bit on what did you originally love about this work? What is it? Who are you making having an impact on? How are you having an impact on those people? Have an honest conversation with yourself or even a colleague about those things. Ask them about the impact that you're having because I guarantee you're having an impact. It's just getting lost in that pile of paperwork that makes up your daily tasks.
It is so comforting. And the way you put it, I feel like that all our listeners will feel very motivated by it. And it like you said, it is just about reclaiming yourself.
Mhm.
You don't have like healing does not begin with quitting your life or quitting things that you're doing. It begins just simple changes, which is so amazing.
Yeah, yeah,
So
definitely agree.
yeah, David, this has been such an enlightening and energizing conversation with you, and I loved every minute of it. So for all those who are listening right now who want to know more about your work, your talks about burnout and fulfillment, where can they connect with you?
Yeah, so they can find me on my website, which is www.davidshar.com. That's an easy way to find me. But I'd love to continue the conversation with you, Nazish, and all of the listeners. You all can find me on LinkedIn. So my name is David Shar. I think I'm the only one. If there's multiple, I'm the bald one who could lose a couple pounds. You'll find me, David Shar on LinkedIn, and I'm active on there and love to continue the conversation.
That is amazing. I will definitely put all these details in our show notes, and I think many of our listeners will connect with you. So, David, thank you so much for reminding us that burnout isn't the end. It is an invitation to realign with what matters the most. And to everyone listening, take a breath. Ask yourself how much you are doing and why you are doing it. Your purpose doesn't need to be reignited from outside. It is already alive within you, waiting for space to breathe again. I am Nazish, and this is Healing Mindset. Until next time, keep nurturing your why and let your healing mindset lead the way.